Thank you, Karen. That's one of my favorite Christmas songs. I'm glad we got to have that this morning. So, let's pray. Heavenly Father, please be with me. Let my words be your words, and that we can give the message that you would have for us today. And thank you for the blessings we've already received from Sabbath school and the first part of church. And please use the Holy Spirit to help us learn what you would have us and receive your blessing. In Jesus' name, amen. Today's sermon's going to be a little bit different. We've had a variety of sermons lately. Just a few weeks ago, we had a modified hymn sing. That was nice. And looking forward to next Sabbath, the Christmas program. I'll probably have to watch that one on Zoom, but I don't want to miss it. So I'm sure it's going to be even better here in person. But today I want to give more of a personal testimony, hopefully not too personal, but a little background. In our house, the TV screen in the living room is mostly to see pictures. And we just put all our pictures from our digital camera in there, or iPhones or whatever, and scanned a lot of old slides. And we're in the process of scanning all those pictures in photo albums that sit in a closet somewhere and never get looked at. But we're scanning those in, and we can see them going across our screen 24 hours a day. And we kind of like that. But every once in a while I notice a picture that's not one of the better ones, and I'm sitting there, can't hardly wait for the 10 seconds to get over so I can see what the next picture is. And noticed a few of those, and so I started going through the pictures that we have in the computer. We're over 20,000 of them. So I started getting rid of some near duplicates and some of those pictures that we weren't thrilled to see when they came across, and started culling that down some. Of course, each year we're still adding more all the time. But my pictures are organized mostly by years. So I was working on the year 2014, getting rid of a lot of the pictures that weren't the best or necessary in there. And when I finished that, I realized 2014 was a big year for Lori and I, with lots of events that had spiritual significance. And I was impressed to maybe share that and see if I could share the blessings or the thoughts that we had from that year. We'll give you a little background. Lori and I got married in 2012. And she had a nice little house conveniently located in Elk Rapids, not too far from the beaches, walking distance to everything. And then I had a house next county over on the far side of the county, Grand Traverse County, and across the street from me was Benzie County. So we were about 40 minutes apart. And we didn't want to have her house and his house, so we decided we were going to sell both houses and then find a place that was in our house, totally our house. Makes good sense, but we got married in October, and by the time honeymoon was over, it was November, and that's not the season of the year to buy and sell houses in this area. So what we did is lived in both of our houses through the winter. She had fixed her house up really nice. Lori's worked in construction most of her adult life, and she knows how to do about everything, knows her way around a hardware store much better than I. And she had fixed her place up pretty good. Mine was still needing to be worked on. I had done the kitchen, but we had lots of carpet to tear out and put down wood floor and tile and bathrooms to renovate. And so what we would do is stay at my place for several days, do a project, then go to her place and relax a little more and see family, because most of her family lived in that area. And we went back and forth. I had had a shaver at both places. We have toothbrushes at both places. Some of our clothes there, some of our clothes here, her dishes there, my dishes here. And it actually worked and was kind of fun. We had variety going back and forth. Not something we would want to do permanently, but we enjoy that during the winter, and we fixed a lot of things up on my house. Then in the spring, we put our houses up for sale. We didn't look real hard at buying right at first because we really didn't want to have 3 mortgages at the same time. So her house sold first toward the end of summer, and then we were all in one place, and we got a little more vigorous about house hunting. But every house we'd look at, one of us may be impressed and the other wasn't, or it didn't appeal to either one of us. Some were too far away, some were too big, and some needed too much work done, even though we like to do the renovating stuff. Some were beyond what we wanted to do. Some were in inconvenient places for getting around, and we just couldn't find a house that we were both happy with. Well, then my house sold toward the end of, late in the fall, and all of a sudden we were looking at the possibility of being homeless. So we had to be out of my house on December 31, New Year's Eve, so the new owners could occupy as of New Year's Day. And we decided, it's getting past house buying season, we better get a rental. Found a rental that looked like it would work for us. And that started for us late in December, so we had a little time to make the move. So our first place was temporary, but it served us well. But I had lived in that house more than twice as long as I ever lived anywhere else. And at one time it had been a house to a whole family of 6. Now Chelsea was the only one still there with me, and the rest of our kids had moved out of our homes. But a lot of stuff had accumulated. So I remember many truckfuls going to the dump across the Benzie County line. My son had built a fort in the ground and left a big pit, and I had made one of the biggest bonfires I'd ever had. Old wood chairs and scrap wood and anything flammable went there. And then the rest of the stuff that we wanted to keep, Chelsea and Lori would take in their cars and I would take in the trucks, and we made many trips taking stuff from that house to our rental amongst our full-time jobs. So it started to look kind of dubious if we were going to get out of there on time. But we did. 11:45 at night on New Year's Eve, Lori was at the rental putting stuff away, so we had a place to live, and Chelsea and I went with our car and truck for one last load and filled up about every square inch we could. And when nothing more would fit, we left at 11:45 that night in quite a snowstorm. So I had the truck in 4-wheel drive, and she followed in her Honda, and we were doing okay. We got to the top of the hill on the 72 before you come down to West Bay there, and we noticed a Jeep stuck in the deep snow on the side of the road. Well, there wasn't much traffic out there because it was New Year's Eve and everyone was in their homes and parties ready to celebrate the new year coming, and it wasn't fit to be out on the highway that night at all. Hardly any traffic, but we stopped and got the tow strap hooked on and pulled that guy out of the deep snow. And that's how we celebrated the start of the new year, 2014. In the first half hour of 2014, then we drove through Traverse City to our rental over on the east end of the county. And that's how the year started. Now, over on the east end, that was less familiar to us. We got to know the area, the Sand Lake Quiet area, good for cross-country skiing. And that was pretty nice. That was a pretty hard winter. The bay completely froze over that winter. That only happens about 20% of the years here, and that was one of them. And that's over by East Bay, by the parks there. So where they plowed a trail out, It's over Lori's head. You just don't see that around here that much, but that was quite the winter we had. Now there's a change of scenery. That's not down at the beach at East Bay in March. This is in South Texas. Every March, we would go back to where I grew up in Weslaco, Texas. It's right down by the Mexican border there. And I had gone to Rio Grande Academy there, and that was the alumni weekend every year in March, and my parents still lived there, so that was our habit to go back there. In Texas, famous for its bluebonnets there. Yeah, I had the privilege of having Adventist education. My parents sacrificed to make sure all of my siblings and I had Adventist education, and I had that from first grade right through medical school. Didn't realize what a privilege it was at the time, but Christian education is important when it's feasible. And that academy was thriving back in those days. Over time, either it becomes less affordable, and it is quite expensive to go to our schools, or some people just don't want to spend the money for that, but it can be difficult. And that school was slowly dying at that time. I know here in Traverse City, we used to have a school, but we just don't have the population of that age group to really support a school anymore. But our church has always been very supportive of Christian education when possible, and any of our teenagers that want to go to GLA, we can make that possible with Project Assist and so forth, and we've done that a lot. And right now we're supporting someone at GLA that's only remotely related to people in our church, but that person has made a decision to follow Jesus. So our support money going for that is well spent. They made a decision to be baptized. And you can't go wrong by helping people out with Christian education. And we also have Aspire, internet Adventist schooling made available to anyone whom that would help. And kind of founded out of Lansing and Traverse City, thanks to our teacher, Principal Ben Zork. And so we've supported our students on that. So this is iChurch. About 20 minutes up the river from the academy there, some of the young people had got together and started their own church. General Conference approved Seventh-day Adventist Church. You can see it's obviously geared toward younger population, but some of us middle-aged and older people enjoyed that quite a bit too. Lori and I got to go service there and see my son on the guitar. He had friends with the kids there, and a lot of those kids had gone to Valley Grande Academy and appreciated their Christian experience so much, they actually got together and started a church, a bunch of young people like this. It's quite impressive. Those kids there, multiple kids in that picture had parents that had been my schoolmates when I went to academy there. And so, almost like a family. And Jeremy did not go to school there. He went down to live with my parents to kind of help them out, and he made friends with those people. And I still think it's quite impressive. A bunch of young people got together and started a church. The church is still going now. Jeremy recently went back. They had a kind of a reunion of all the people that started that, and it was kind of a special time. So Christian education, one of the important things from that year, it brings to mind the verse in Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And that applied very much to me. It's thanks to my home and school education. Now I'm old and I will not depart from it. Now, when I was younger, I kind of did, but it says when you're old, you will not depart from it. So I'm still on track there. Then we came home back to this. This was the last day of March. The bay was still frozen over. Grandkids and I were able to walk way out there, but you notice our jackets are unzipped or off at that time, so it's starting to get warmer. We continued to look for houses. We prayed a lot in our search for houses that God would guide us, and we were still coming up with nothing. So we had the opportunity to take a trip in April to California. Now, from 2003 to 2011, my parents and I would hike the Pacific Crest Trail in California as much as we could. The lower elevations we would do in spring before it got too hot, and the higher elevations we'd do after the snow melted in the summer. And by this time, we were about 800 miles from the Mexican border up through California and then the High Sierra. So we could only hike in July or later up there because there was too much snow. But 2011 was the last year we backpacked up there. And my dad was having a lot of trouble that time. A few months later, we found out why. He had leukemia. So in 2012 was the first year we hadn't hiked California in quite a long time. But I was okay with that, because in 2012 I was dating Lori, and we were hiking all over northern Michigan, and that was more fun than the Sierras even. So that was good. But in 2014, we had a chance to go back, Mom and Dad and Lori and I, and we were going to see the places we had hiked, to get to show that to Lori, and Dad and Mom could see that again. We were going to explore some things around there that we hadn't done previously because we were geared toward the trail. This time Dad couldn't hike, but we were going to see some other things. So we flew into Palm Springs on Friday and went to church there Sabbath morning. It's a welcome change of scenery from the cold, frozen north. I like winter, but I also like to see some green come spring. And we didn't have it here yet. But there's Palm Springs. That mountain in the background is Mount San Jacinto. Rises right out of Palm Springs there. For those of you familiar with Doug Batchelor, the richest caveman, up on that mountain is where he had his cave, where he lived as a caveman. If you are not familiar with that, you would want to get that book and read it. It's a wonderful read. The Richest Caveman. You can go to Amazing Facts website and find that book and read it. But that's the mountain he lived in. So Sabbath afternoon, we drove up less than 2 hours away into the San Bernardino Mountains. And in California, you drive 2 hours, you can get quite a change of scenery typically. And we did. Up there, there was fresh fallen snow from the night before. And I guess that morning they even had chain rule in effect, but by the time we got up there, it was okay. It was, the roads were clear. And the idea was to do some hikes up there, but the next day there was still too much snow to really do comfortable hiking. So we drove back down toward Palm Springs to Joshua Tree National Monument. To me, that's just an awesome place, the prettiest desert that I know of. And we hadn't really seen that. I had seen it a few times when I lived in Loma Linda, but my parents and Lori had never been there before, so we got to explore that. We found a little 1 mile loop that Dad thought he could probably hike because there wasn't a lot of elevation changes on it, so there we are going for our walk. Not everyone that lived in the Northwoods really likes the desert. I lived in the Southwest for a lot of my life, and I came to love the desert, and especially in spring, there's a lot of beauty. There's a beryl cactus blooming, prickly pear cactus blooming, and more of what we saw in that 1 mile loop. Well, that kind of wore Dad out. That's about all he could do. Lori and Mom and I did a couple little walks to see Skull Rock there and the Cholla Gardens. And when you're walking through the cholla cactus there, you probably want to stay on the trail. Those can be pretty vicious. The next day then, the snow had melted sufficiently. Sorry about that. Get back on track here. So we did a 14-mile hike from Onyx Summit down to Big Bear Lake. And I remember a lot of big trees in that area. Kind of wanted to show Lori that. My dad rode up with us to the beginning of the trail. Then he went back to the condo. We hiked the 14 miles, and then I got to meet up with him afterward. But that's looking the view we had back to Mount San Gorgonio, the biggest mountain in California south of the Sierras. And the big trees. There's Lori, my wife, the tree hugger, and I'm the chainsaw lover, but we get along all right. I love trees too. But the main point I wanted to bring with this is we talk about God's second book, nature. But sometimes we kind of ignore that even more than we ignore our Bibles too much. God's second book is very important too, to see his creation. And there's a lot of beautiful things in this world. So, then the next day we decided to do something that Dad could do also. We were going to go back down to Palm Springs and ride the tram up Mount San Jacinto. And a fairly rugged country there. There we are at the top. You notice there's still a little bit of snow left. Dad stayed in the lodge. He wasn't going to do any hikes up there at the high altitude, but Lori and Mom and I took a short loop hike up in a beautiful area up there in the high country. That's quite the fancy switchbacks there. Beautiful country. And there we are looking back down to Palm Springs from up on the mountain, and we took the tram back. Now, another hike we did up in the high country, the next day, Dad would take us up, we'd drop a car off, then he would drive us back to the beginning of the hike, and we'd hike up and have that car waiting for us. But I remembered from previous hikes there from years before, there about 100 or 200 yards past where we parked the car, there was an excellent view place with excellent views that I thought would be neat for Dad to see again and for Lori to see. So we did that short little walk, and there's Dad and Mom at the view site. And there's the view they had. Big Bear Lake, Mount San Gorgonio in the background. The pictures don't do it full justice when you have the full panoramic view. But again, God's creation, even though we've really messed it up, it's still spectacular, and there's a lot of good things to see. And Lori and Mom and I, when we did our hike, we were in a little closer to that and had even a better view. There's Big Bear Lake, Big Bear ski area, which didn't have much snow on it by late in April, but then San Gorgonio behind it was still a lot of snow. So, we really need to focus probably a little more on God's second book too. And we can do that in this area, the parks in the bay. Traverse City is a beautiful area. Today it's all covered up with snow, but that's beautiful in its own way too. People get tired of it by March, or maybe even by now, but it is beautiful out there. So by then we're winding up our trip. My dad really likes miniature golf, and we were able to go back down to the low altitude and do a game of miniature golf before flying home. Then it was time to look very earnestly for a house. We still had the same problems. We'd pray and pray. We'd go look at houses, and we just, no, this isn't right for us. In May, the big event My daughter Jessica and her husband Justin both graduated from CMU. That's an ending that leads to a special beginning, ending of your educational career, beginning of your vocation, and that was exciting for them. Unfortunately, Jessica's not fond of this kind of weather, so she wanted to move to Florida. So instead of being 2.5 hours down the road, they're 5 states away in Florida, where they still are to this day. But they should get to live, people should live where they want to when possible. Me, I kind of like it here. I like the winters. Lori would probably be happy to move south, except family's here, and what's more important than family? So we're happy to live in Michigan. So we kept on house hunting. There was another event coming up. On June 1, Chelsea was going to get married. She chose to be married out on the bayfront outdoors. Well, in May, there was still ice floating around in the bay. And when there's ice in the bay, that means the temperature of the water is still in the 30s. And the slightest north wind just was like a giant air conditioner right through Traverse City area. So we were kind of worried about that, but we didn't need to be. And there we are out there, and it looks like it's pretty nice weather, but it wasn't. It was terrible. We hit 90 degrees that day. We could have used some of that air conditioning. June 1, 2014, we hit 90 degrees. These poor guys are out there with their black shoes on the sidewalk. Their feet were getting roasted. Felt their feet were burning, while the long-winded wedding officiant just kept on going. Now, I was okay. I had my cowboy boots on. Those are better geared for heat. And I was under the gazebo thing and kind of shaded. Those poor guys told me it was pretty rough, and even there, it looks like they're having a hard time. But other than that, the wedding came off well. To me, there's 3 wonderful beginnings in a person's life. Number 1, when a person is born. Number 2, when they're reborn and baptized. And number 3, when they get married and join their lives together with someone else. That's a pretty wonderful time. Unfortunately, in about 60% of the cases, it doesn't last. Over half the marriages end up in divorce and separation. Even in the Adventist church, we're not doing wonderfully better. Almost half of our marriages in the same way. Now, my dad and mom had a wonderful relationship and marriage. And I thought that's the way all of them should be. As a young man, I was kind of critical of people who got divorced. They just didn't have enough commitment. They should never get married again. They don't deserve to be married. They're just going to get divorced again. And that was kind of my attitude. I cringe when I think back about my 20s. But I thought, I'm just going to do this the right way. He knows those words, I'm going to do this. After some years, I became one of those statistics. It's a painful thing to go through a divorce. You're embarrassed, you feel like a failure, you feel like you're being ostracized by the people you know who had attitudes kind of like I did as a young guy. You don't know what's going to happen the rest of your life. You're giving up the life you know. And not everyone's at fault in a divorce. Some divorces, it's sort of one-sided. Others, it may be more 50-50. I know in mine, there was plenty of blame to go around. I just thought I could do everything on my own. I felt strong and knowledgeable enough. The rigors of medical school and residency showed me that I can't do everything on my own. Those are pretty hard times. There was a lot to have to learn, and then you're responsible for people's lives as you try to take care of them. And I started learning I need more than my own knowledge. I need God to be with me. In my rocky marriage, I realized the same thing finally. I needed more than what I was able to do. Unfortunately, it was too late, and we became a statistic, and then I needed God even more to get through the difficult times. Because of my lousy attitude as a young man, I had to be thrown down on the ground and kicked around a little bit before I could grow up and realize it's not what we do. It's if we get God in our side to do things with us. People going through divorce, we have no business being critical of them, even if we think they maybe are in the wrong. Many in our congregation have had to go through that. If someone's going through it, we got to remember they are still our brother and sister, and we're no better than them. We all come short in the eyes of God, and it's important to make those people feel like they're still at home with us. Matthew 7:1 became one of my favorite verses, taken from Jesus' Mount of Blessing sermon. Judge not that ye be not judged. I had to learn that the hard way. Maybe some of you have too. We have no busy judging others. Our job is to help others. Well, in the meantime, we still didn't have a house, and our rental time was running out. So we were facing homelessness again. So we found the rental we were able to extend for 3 months to get us through toward the end of summer, and we prayed even harder, but we were starting to wonder, why are our prayers not getting answered? Lori had a similar background to mine. We'll keep hers private here, but she was witnessed to as an adult and had some exposure as a child to Christianity, but as an adult, she gave her heart to the Lord. Lori felt strong and invincible, too. She thought she could do everything on her own, and we had come to both realize that's not the case. So when we started dating, we were kind of wary of getting married again after what we'd both been through. We prayed long and hard, probably for many hours, about what we should do. And we felt like we should go ahead and get married, but only with God's blessing. When you do it right, it's the most wonderful thing, and I can attest to 13 and a half years now of wonderful life. So I can only pray that other people decide to do that earlier than I did, and they can have more than 13 and a half years by the time they're my age. But when you do it with God's blessing, it's a wonderful thing. So, we kept looking for new listings in the home market. Didn't find any. One thing I really liked about my job, I'm retired, and I can't say I miss it too much, but I miss the PTO and the paid CME, continuing medical education, because Munson would fit a lot of the bill for me to go places. And at that time, I was enjoying going to wilderness living seminars in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a beautiful place, and American Academy of Family Practice, or the Alaska Academy of Family Practice, would have seminars each summer at different places in Alaska. And having grown up some of my early years in Alaska, I loved going back. And we went to Juneau and Fairbanks and Seward. And this year they were having it in Seward. Lori had never been to Alaska, so we opted to go there. In Alaska especially, you just see God's glory in his creation. That's up on Marathon Mountain looking down at the city of Seward. That's the ocean down there. We're up on the mountain. You see there's quite a bit of snow up in the mountains. This is late June. And there's even more beautiful picture of the same area because there's a more beautiful person in it. But, again, realize God's creation, the wonderful things he's made for us in a world where we've really messed it up. It still looks that pretty. So that's thanks to our Creator. Then back to house hunting vigorously, because our 3 months were about up. We did not want to stay in that rental any longer. And one day, Lori found a house listing on 2.5 acres. I wasn't very interested because I came from a house that was on 8 acres of woods. And before that, I had lived in a house that was 10 acres in the woods. So I didn't even want to look at anything less than 5 acres. But we were getting desperate. Well, let's go give it a try. So we went to check this house out, and it kind of looked pretty nice there. We thought, this is worth a look. And right below it, there was a stream, and that was nice. Now, I had found some listings on the Boardman River. I really wanted to live there, and we looked at those in the spring. You know what Brown Bridge Road looks like in the spring? Big snowbanks and big puddles, and I really wanted to live on the river, and it's good to be married to a smart person. Lori said, this road is this bad now. How much of the year is going to be so bad we can't even get back and forth to work? That would have been a disaster to live there. But this wasn't the Boardman River here, but the stream was nice. You could hear it from the driveway. And as we went through the house, the people had kept it up real nice. We thought, looks pretty wonderful. For the first time, we both liked the same house at the same time. And by the time we left there, we thought, we better put in an offer quick before someone else does. And after a little bit of haggling, the house became ours. It didn't take us long to realize that our long prayers for almost 2 years by that time were answered. This was better than any house we had looked at. Just perfect for us. It was the closest we'd ever lived to our work and to church here. And we were very happy. That house wasn't available until that specific time. God knew that's what would be best for us, and he let us find it at the right time. Nothing else would have been as good. And the 2.5 acres was no problem because there's 7 acres in the back between us and a subdivision. It's kind of common land. We all pay a little bit of tax on that, and that land can't be done anything with, except for the trail going through it. That trail goes down to state land, which encompasses the entire Vasa Trail system. And then there's a Kalkaska connector trail from that goes through Sand Lake Quiet area, which the North Country Trail also goes through. And you can hook onto that there. It goes all the way to Vermont. And there it ends at the Appalachian Trail, which goes all the way down to Georgia. So we can hike from our front yard there all the way to Georgia if we want. We've actually worked on that. We've done the North Country Trail down as we're somewhere east of Cincinnati now. Cincinnati, Ohio. So it was just perfect for us. God answered our prayer. We can't speed God up because he knows the timing that's best. And that was a learning experience for us. We knew we needed God and depended on him. And we didn't know why it took almost 2 years to get a house, but that house has been a blessing to us. We had one more trip that year. I remember we'd already been to Texas, California, and Alaska. To me, that was just normal life. You have time off, you go somewhere. It was a new experience for Lori, who had very rarely crossed the Michigan state line. So we had one more trip planned. My brother and I were working the North Country Trail. He lived north of Petoskey there, and we had hiked from his house to Mackinac Bridge and then did some of the North Country Trail down this area. But we decided we were going to go camping in the UP and start hiking from Mackinac Bridge through the UP also. So one year we camped on the south side of Brevoort Lake there and hiked from Mackinac Bridge to Brevoort Lake. Took about 3 days. The next year we camped on the north side of Brevoort Lake and kept hiking north up toward Whitefish Bay and Lake Superior. And then we decided every fall we're going to do that at peak color season, enjoy the next section of the North Country Trail. And Dad and Mom started coming. When Lori and I got married, she started coming. And it was just our annual fall visit. This year, the year before, we were at the Pictured Rocks section, but there was one of these government shutdowns, and that year they didn't even allow you into the national park, so we had to skip over Pictured Rocks and do the next section. So this year we were going to go back and do Pictured Rocks. Dad couldn't really hike with us, but he would go with us to the trailheads or meet us at the end, and we'd have lots of visit time, and he was still gung-ho for at least doing what he could with that. Right before that trip, Dad's leukemia wasn't going so well, so he saw his doctor. Testing showed he had a more virulent or acute form of leukemia now. And they said, you got to go to the cancer center in Houston. So he already had his trip planned out. They're going to spend a week on Galveston Bay, on the beach at Galveston, and then drive on up to Michigan, meet us, and go to the UP. Well, instead of going to Galveston, they went to Houston, to the MD Anderson Cancer Center. That's a wonderful hospital facility there for cancer, probably the best place to be. Not what was in our plans. So my brother and I were lucky, and Lori, we'd all taken off work to make that trip, so we had the time off to instead go down there and visit with him. By that time, Dad was mostly bedbound, but we were able to still visit and talk a lot and played some rook card games and watched some football on the television in the room since there wasn't much else to do, but we had good visit. And I'm glad we got to go down there, especially during that time. You know, all my children went there and spent time with him, and my brother and sister did too, so there were a lot of family around with him at all times. But when I left that hospital to come back home to work, I knew it was the last time I was ever going to see my dad. They actually got him stabilized at one point where they said he could actually go live in the apartments off campus. MD Anderson has apartments about a mile away from the hospital itself where spouses or family support people can live, and if the patient's doing okay, they can actually go live in that apartment also and just come into the hospital daily for their chemotherapy treatments or whatever they had to have done. Mom was very happy. Dad was good enough to come home to that apartment anyway, and she still had faith God was going to heal him and things could get back to normal. Well, that first night away, he got to the point where he could hardly breathe. So my son was there, took him into emergency room, and he had pneumonia, an opportunistic type of pneumonia. Means an infection that wouldn't bother most of us, but when you already have an illness making you immunocompromised, it can be fatal. In the emergency department, he couldn't breathe hardly at all, so they had to intubate him. In retrospect, maybe not the best decision, but you don't know, you don't have time to think about it. If they're going down, you get that tube in. Within 2 or 3 days, we knew that the pneumonia had done enough damage to the lung. He never breathed on his own again. So fortunately, there were a lot of family there to help support. My son was there, my daughter was there, and my brother came back from Florida to spend time with him. And he was surrounded by family, and they helped my mom make the difficult decision to pull the plug. And we lost Dad. I remember some years before that, Dad had talked to me. He had lost his dad by a sudden accident, instant death kind of thing. But he was close to my mom's godparents. Mom had left the farm to go to school, and she lived with a family medicine doctor and his wife, and they were kind of like her second set of parents. And my dad was very close to them also. We called them Doc and Frankie. My dad actually worked in their medical office as a lab tech when he got out of college before he went on to other things and eventually medical school. So Doc and Frankie were like our third set of grandparents. When Doc died, I remember my dad telling me how weird it felt to always having a father figure in your life, and then all of a sudden you're the patriarch, no other father figure. And now I knew that feeling. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to have a dad that represented God to me, and I had been learning more and more to trust in God, and so it wasn't too hard to put all my trust into God, because my father showed me that way, but it was still a weird feeling. It's kind of like the Santa Claus thing. When you're a little kid, you believe in Santa Claus. As you get older, you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. As you get even older, you become Santa Claus. And then you get even older, you look like Santa Claus. Same thing with fathers. When you're 6 years old, your dad knows everything in the world, and he's always right. When you're 16, you realize he's not quite always right. In fact, he may be not right very much at all. 16 and 17. Well, you get to be 26 or 30, have a couple kids of your own, you realize your dad really did know an awful lot. And then the fourth stage, you just wish you could talk to him again. And that's where we were at. But now I was the patriarch of the family. But God has this promise, Hebrews 13:5, I will never leave nor forsake you. That's a quote of what God actually told Joshua when they were ready to take on the big conquest of Canaan that we've studied about this quarter in Sabbath school. I will never leave you nor forsake you. God has that promise to us too. So in November, we went up to Washington, where Dad was from, Walla Walla area, College Place, and had the memorial service, now often called Celebration of Life service. And it was comforting, especially for Mom, to be around all that family, because she was taking it really hard. Even at the end, she was expecting something better. So at the graveside, my daughter and I sang a song, Precious Memories. Dad really liked Jim Reeves' religious music, and they played that when he was in a hospital intubated to help calm him down. And so my daughter said, oh, that's a good song, Precious Memories. So she and I sang that at the graveside. We had a hard time getting through that. And then I sang the song I wrote, No More Goodbye, and kind of tweaked the words to that song about looking forward to the resurrection day. And that is our hope. During that time, a lot of people in this church were losing their parents. Now, my friends losing spouses. We keep seeing that happening. But the sting of death is lessened quite a bit because we have that hope of the resurrection. These people that are sick, it's time for them to take a little nap because they're worn out. And when they wake up, it's going to be the most wonderful thing ever. God's calling them to himself to take them home. How special is that? And that's what we were thinking about Dad's memorial there. Dad was buried there along with his parents, his great-parents, and his great-grandparents, all in the same cemetery. My great-great-grandpa Gottlieb buried there. I didn't know good old Gottlieb, but he was from Germany. My great-grandpa Peter, Dad's aunt who died at a young age, Dad's brother-in-law, a whole family of people that died, hopefully all in Jesus. Can you imagine that? When the resurrection day comes, a whole bunch of family waking up together there. This memorial was the weekend before Thanksgiving. We went home, and I noticed I didn't have any pictures of Thanksgiving there, so I don't remember what we did or how thankful we were, but we had lots to be thankful for. Lori and I had a new house together. We had each other. We had family. There were still many things to be thankful for, and there always is for us. Then Christmas time came along, our first Christmas in our new house. We didn't have a lot of lights because I lived so far back in the woods, no one could see the house. So we didn't put up a lot of lights outside. Now I have lights from one end of the 2.5 acres to way down to the end of a fence near the other end of those acres. So I don't know what I got for Christmas that year, but I see I got a good loaf of Lori's homemade whole wheat bread. And what else could you want? What else could be better than that? It was pretty special. Now, we know that Jesus was not born on December 25. In fact, December 25 is the birthday of a pagan guy who wanted to become God. And it's a big pagan day of celebration, so when the church courted the pagans to come into the church, they decided to keep the holiday and just make up that it's Jesus' birthday. But we are counseled that during that time we can still and should still take time to remember Jesus coming here to save us and his birth, and have trees and decorate and sing Christmas songs, especially ones about Jesus. That's all proper to do. We counseled that. But we want to remember the real reason for the season. It's easy to get involved in all the commercial things that go with Christmas, but it's kind of like Larry Norman, the Christian singer, said, "It used to be the birthday of the man who saved our necks. Now it stands for Santa Claus. We spell it with an X." And that's kind of true. Christmas doesn't mean what it's really meant to mean to most people, but here in this church, I think we will make sure that's what it means to us. Then after, this final picture, we're getting there. This is looking out my bedroom window on Christmas Day. No white Christmas that year. It's kind of different than the year before it. The last vestiges of snow were melting away Christmas Day, and in town's probably already completely gone. But then comes New Year's, the end of the year, which becomes the beginning of the next year. It's kind of an artificial time. People do these New Year's resolutions. I've said many times that I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions. Tried that, done that, and like most people, by 1 or 2 weeks into February, it was a past thing. John Hill did a sermon this year around New Year's, and he said the same thing. Those resolutions don't mean much at all. 85% of them are gone before the middle of February, and the other 15% probably aren't too far behind. But I am a big fan of December 13 resolutions. Why wait till New Year's? What about right now? What do we need to resolve? As I've learned in my life, we need God with us all the time. The big decisions like marriage and where to live, what to take in school, and the little decisions. Who are we going to meet today that we can help? What should we buy for furniture even? Things like that. Bring God into the decision making, and you just aren't going to go wrong. I want to make a December 13 resolution that in the year 2026, I'm going to have shorter sermons. And I see the clock in front of me there. So I think I preach again the end of January. That sermon's going to be short and hopefully sweet. That's my resolution for 2026. But most importantly, We've got to every day resolve we don't want to go through the day without God on our side. We have plenty of Bible text promises. 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your cares on him because he cares for you. You've got to remember that. Cast our cares on him. Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6, one of my favorite verses. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Some translations say he will make your path straight. What does that mean? Well, when you're going your way, you're going here, over there, all over the place and getting nowhere. I know that feeling. In disc golf, I shank the disc off into the trees, and then I don't have a good throw, so I try to throw out of the trees at a certain angle, hoping I go forward more, but no, it goes to the trees on the other side of the fairway. I try to get out of there, and I hit another tree trying to get out of the fairway and have to throw again. And after 4 throws, I'm not up to where I should have been on throw number 1. That's the way life is when you're trying to go your own way. With God, he will make your path straight, right down the fairway. I want to look up Matthew 6:34. We already talked about Matthew 7:1. This is the verse right before that verse. Matthew 6:34, also one of my favorite texts in the Bible. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. How can we not worry about tomorrow? A lot of things are going to happen. We don't know what the year 2026 holds for us. No doubt there will be trials and hardships. No doubt there will also be peace and joy, because God promises us peace and joy. But we're going to have the hard times also. If we trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not on our own understanding, and we fully trust in God, we can quit worrying about what tomorrow brings. Now, that's easier said than done, but the more you learn to trust God, the more peace and joy you're going to have because you have less worry. The last verse I want to mention is still in Matthew, but the very last verse in Matthew 28. Yeah, Matthew 28, verse 20. God promises, and lo, I am with you always, even till the end of the earth. That end of the earth is coming, like we talked about in Sabbath school this morning and in weeks past. That end of the earth is coming soon. And God promises to be with us. Those aren't going to be easy times. But with God with us, those times are doable, and we can still have peace and joy even in bad times. So I hope you'll resolve not just to have good New Year's resolutions, but starting now. Hopefully a lot of you already do this every morning. Invite God into your lives to be with you the whole day. He's already invited you to be with him. And let's make it work by inviting him to be with us. This time we're going to close with Song 125, Joy to the World.